Good morning. So today we're going to focus on parallel and perpendicular lines. If you can remember from years ago, parallel lines are lines that never cross, so like railroad tracks, and perpendicular lines are the ones that form the right angle. So I'm going to show you how to write an equation for a line that's parallel and write an equation for a line that's perpendicular. As always, please complete the do now. Watch this video of examples, complete the Google form on parallel and perpendicular lines, and when you're done, complete the reflection. The easiest thing to do is always, if you're given an equation in standard form, is to put it in slope-intercept form, because then you can easily tell if the lines are parallel or perpendicular. So we are going to focus on parallel first. In order to determine if lines are parallel, the slope has to be the same, okay? So if we look at the blue line, we need to find the slope. So we are going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And it doesn't matter what you call y2, just make sure you're consistent. So if I do y2 as a -2, y1 as 2 over x2, which is -4, minus a -3, I get my slope to be -4 over -1, which is a slope of 4, okay? So the same thing with the red line, you do y2, -2, minus y1, which is 3, over x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is 1, and I would get -5 over -1, which is a slope of 5. And let's look at the green line. So the green line, same thing, y2, -3, minus 1, because that's y1, x2, which is 3, minus 4, which is going to give me -4 over -1, which gives me a slope of 4. So in this case, the blue and the green line are parallel. They have the same slope. Even though when you look, the red kind of does look parallel, it is not parallel. It does not have the same slope. So for lines to be perpendicular, the slopes have to be the negative reciprocal. And I'll show you how that works. First, let's begin to find the slope. So we're going to find the slope of each of these lines. So same thing, y2, 4 minus y1, which is 6, x2, which is 1, minus a -5, which gives me -2 over 6, which gives me a slope of -1/3. Okay, I look at the red, y2, -2, minus 0 over 2 minus -5, which is going to give me a slope of -2/7. And then I go to the green line, and the green is -2 minus 5 over -2 minus 0. So I get -7 over -2, which becomes 7 over 2. Now, if you look at this, when you multiply the two slopes together, it should be a -1. That's what they mean by negative reciprocal. So which two slopes should multiply to a -1? And if you see -2/7 times 7 over 2, that is a -1. The green and the red line are perpendicular. Their slopes are the negative reciprocal. So in this case, you're given 3 lines. The easiest way is to put them all in slope-intercept form so we can see the slopes. So if I do that, remember from yesterday, this is 4y equals -x plus 3. I divide by 4, and I get y equals -1/4 x plus 3/4. So the slope in this case is -1/4. And then the third one, same thing. I have -8y equals 2x plus 16. I divide by -8. And I get y equals -1/4 x minus 2. Okay? So that's in slope-intercept form. That tells me the slope is negative 1/4. So now we need to look. Which lines, if any, are parallel? So parallel had to be the same slope, and that is lines B and C. They have the same slope. Perpendicular, I spelled that wrong, sorry. Perpendicular is A is perpendicular to B, and A is perpendicular to C, because they are both the negative reciprocal. So after you find the slopes, you look at it, same slope, parallel, so B and C. The negative reciprocal is perpendicular. So A is perpendicular to B, and A is perpendicular to C. So the next example you're given is 3 lines with points. You have to find the slope. Parallel and perpendicular is all dependent on the slope. So you use the formula we use for slope, change in y over change in x, and you get 3/6, which A has a slope of 1/2. Then you do the same thing for B, change in y, 1 minus a negative 3 over 5 minus negative 5, and you get 4/10, which is 2/5. And now you just need to find the slope for C. So C is negative 1 minus a negative 3 over 2 minus negative 2, and you get 2/4, which is 1/2. So in this case, A and C are parallel because they have the same slope. Parallel and perpendicular are dependent on the slope, so you want to get it in slope-intercept form. So in this case, I am going to want to get it into y equals mx plus b. So I have to get the y to the left side, the x to the right side. I divide by 3, and I get y equals negative 4/3 x plus 3 for A. When I go to B, I am going to want to divide by 8 to both sides. So I get y equals negative 3/4 x plus 2. And then the last one, same thing. I want to get it in slope-intercept form. So I divide by 4. And I get y equals negative 3/4 x plus 9/4. So now we need to look, and right away you should see parallel because that is the same slope. So parallel lines are B and C. They have the same slope, they are parallel. And then if you look, you do not have the negative reciprocal, so they are not perpendicular. B and C are not perpendicular because when they multiply together, they equal a positive 1. So now I'm going to show you the last 2 examples how to write a line that's parallel and write a line that's perpendicular. Parallel has the same slope. So like we did the other day, given the slope and a point, you can find the y-intercept. So if you do y equals, you would keep the slope because it's parallel, x plus, instead of the 1, you put b because you want to find a new value using this point, which is x and y. Then we are going to sub in the point. So you get negative 2 equals negative 2 times 1 plus b. Negative 2 equals negative 2 plus b. I add 2 to both sides, and I get b equals 0. So a line that is parallel is just going to be y equals negative 2x, okay, because it'll go through the given point, and it's parallel because it has the same slope. The last example I want to do is perpendicular, but before I can even begin, I need to put this in slope-intercept form. So remember, I would divide by 2 and I get y equals 2x minus 3/2. Okay, so now if it's perpendicular, I know I need the negative reciprocal. Well, the reciprocal would be 1/2. So it's negative because I need the negative reciprocal. So the new slope of my line perpendicular is going to be negative 1/2. So now I set it up. Y equals negative 1/2 x plus b. I am going to use my point that I am given. I was given y is 1, x is 3, and I need to solve for b. So half of 3, negative 1/2 of 3 is negative 1 1/2 plus b equals 1. I am going to add 3/2, and I get b to equal 5/2. So my line perpendicular is going to be y equals negative 1/2 x plus 5/2. That one might have been confusing to you, so I'm going to show you because perpendicular is a little different one more time. So if the slope is 2/3, I need the negative reciprocal. So my new slope perpendicular is going to be negative 3/2. So I write it y equals negative 3/2 x plus b. I take my point, y is 2, x is negative 2, and I need to solve for b. So I get 3 plus b equals 2. I subtract 3, and I get b to equal negative 1. So my equation for the line perpendicular is y equals negative 3/2 x minus 1. That would be perpendicular to that given line. I know this was a long video and this is pretty challenging, but please try your best. If you need help, it's best you join Zoom at 11:30 a.m. I will do it with you as a group. We will all take turns. Use the link you received in your email. If you did not get it, please email me. Remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So if it's 2, the parallel line has to be 2. If it's 1/2, it has to be 1/2, the slope. Perpendicular lines, the slope is the negative reciprocal. So if the slope is 1/2, the negative reciprocal is negative 2. If the slope is 3, the negative reciprocal is negative 1/3. They have to multiply to a negative 1 to be perpendicular. If you need me, you can also email me. Have a good day.